Is the meeting being recorded?
Yes, this session will be.
If you don't mind, I will be without my camera.
All right, no problem.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, yes, we nearly have everyone on board.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Good
Yeah.
morning. Can you see the messages Professor Veuthey sent on the chat? Or not? No? Okay, so I think we will have to send messages again.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Please do that. But anyway, I'm very happy to be with you this morning again. Just to tell you one thing is that yesterday's presentation by Anissa Belal, again, very important speaker, will be taking place on Friday. Friday at what time, Roman?
At 12 on Friday. 12
Yes.
from 1.
From 12 to 1. I think it well worth at least taking the time to watch her presentation. Yesterday she had a problem of connection, so we are happy to catch up on Friday. So now this morning, again, I think it's very good to speak to you about this issue of trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants, because you would say, okay, why is it? Are we dealing with human trafficking and migrant smuggling in IHL? But because I think human trafficking is a massive violation both of human rights and international humanitarian law, in addition, of course, refugee law, labor law, and that recent conflicts have made clear that victims of armed conflicts are easy targets for traffickers, even in Europe. And today, you will be able to watch on BBC a moving testimony of a splendid British athlete, Mo Farah. And Mo Farah recently, just 2 days ago, revealed that he had been a victim of human trafficking. So I think, unfortunately, it's in the limelight, and I would love to discuss that with you for this hour. Again, you've seen the message of Laura with all those links. Those links are in the first slide of my presentation, and you will not only see some 20 slides we could have this morning, but you will see also additional slides and also additional resources and additional documents free for you to watch and download them. So my first question to every one of you is, how would you define trafficking in persons, and how would you actually make the difference between human trafficking and smuggling of migrants? Could anyone give me an answer? You could do that also by chat or by taking the floor. Please feel free to ask Laura and Roman to give you. Oh,
Paola, please.
Oh, Annie Minister, exceptional. I'm very happy to see you. Is against person, yes.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I was going to say is trafficking in person entails deceiving people and taking them against their will, while smuggling isn't that exactly.
That's yes, close to to a full truth, because actually, you know, against their will, also part of trafficking could be by deception, by fraud. You know, you make believe people you will be offering them a good job, and nothing of this happens. Joël, please. Joël. Yeah.
I was about to say the same, that smuggling, for smuggling is necessary to go against the will of the victim as the main defense.
Yeah, smuggling is often with the full and informed will of the of the person. You know, you ask a traffickant to take you across a border or across the sea, across a desert, and even you pay them for this, and so that's a different phenomenon. And because I would say exploitation is key for trafficking, and it's a crime against a person, and smuggling of migrants, it's a crime against states, against immigration law principally. And what forms would you say could human trafficking take? Any answer? Oh, if not, I will go on with my presentation. And please, Romain, could you put next? Oh, forced labor. Thank you. Thank you indeed. And first, thank you, Annie, for this. Forced labor, and indeed, Tal had answered also for profit, financial gain. Yes, both trafficking and smuggling are actually for financial gain, for profit. And it's a huge profit. So you see, first, I'm giving you this image of a CNN Freedom Project. I must say you had also BBC, you had also the Deutsche Welle, and other, I must say, very interesting media, and including Thomson, Reuters Foundation, giving witnesses. But still, the key sentence is slavery is not a thing of the past. Next slide, please. Then you see tens of millions, possibly 40 million people are enslaved in the world today. And you see 150 billion US dollars, but it could be the same in euros, could be the same in Swiss francs, and 50% of slavery victims in labor slavery, nearly 40% in forced marriage, and 13% in sex slavery. And you see most of the victims are women and girls, and 1/4 of slaves today are under the age of 18. Next slide, please. So what, you see human trafficking and human smuggling, what convention and which protocols deal with both HT and HS? Any answer? Oh, and thank you, Anastasia, for trafficking for donor organs. Yes, we could come to that, yes. So I would say first, everyone knows about the Palermo Protocol. Palermo Protocol and 2 additional protocols. The Palermo Convention against transnational organized crimes and 2 additional protocols, one on human trafficking and the second on human smuggling.
You have some answers in the chat also.
Yes, Palermo 2000, that's very good. 2000, so you see, it's relatively recent. Obviously, the prohibition of slavery took a few centuries, and even, you know, the French Revolution did not grant freedom to all slaves, and even Napoleon did wage war against Haiti, and even a French king did wage war against independent Haiti to extract indemnity for slave owners. You know, it's and you had already, yes, very good, Anne, what you're mentioning. And indeed, when we look at what's happening recently, not only we have the 2000 Palermo Convention and protocols, but we have also the very interesting Council of Europe Convention, 2005. And what is interesting, this 2000 Convention of the Council of Europe Convention, it's open to all states, not only members of the European the Council of Europe. And what is interesting is that the Convention of the Council of Europe is not limited to transnational crime, because quite often people say, oh yes, of course, human trafficking is happening across borders. But unfortunately, it's not always the case. So it can happen even within the same country, and even, I would say, within the same family. So that's why I will go after that to actors, protection international, clearly the Palermo Protocol, but definitely we shall see that not only the Palermo Protocol, protocols, not only the Council of Europe, but you have also African and other regional instruments. And what we can say is that definitely human rights instruments, international human law instruments do apply and could be very useful to protect victims of human trafficking, could be also very useful to prevent and prosecute human trafficking. Please, next. Well, so you see similarities and difference. So both are illegal, trafficking and smuggling, but both are profitable businesses involving human beings. Both are involving criminal networks, but not always. You see, for trafficking, legal or illegal documents taken, I may say passports are taken from victims, coercion or actually fraud, and restricted movement, and reduction to an object, reduction to, excuse me, a commodity. That's it. But for trafficking, but for smuggling, it's a kind of a voluntary, you know, free will. You are asking for it. You're asking for a service, which implies often, of course, a movement, and is a crime against a state. Next, please. So you see, the 2000 Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly, and you have two protocols, one protocol against the trafficking in persons, and one protocol against the smuggling of migrants. And actually, UNODC, headquartered in Vienna, is actually a very important UN agency implementing or doing a lot for this. Next. You see, human trafficking and human smuggling are both prohibited by international law, not necessarily a cross-border crime for human trafficking, a crime against the state, yes, for human smuggling, then crime against human rights, definitely for human trafficking, a crime with exploitative purpose, yes, a crime of which one can be victim in his own country, a crime which occurs without the consent of the person concerned, yes, that's all human trafficking. Please, next. You see, coercion, deception, exploitation, that's really what I would say the key words for human trafficking. Next. And you see, the legal definition, you have three elements of the legal definition: an act, means, and purpose. Act in blue, recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons. Means in green, threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, or the abuse of power or position of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person. And then the purpose, exploitation. Exploitation is key, include as a minimum the exploitation of prostitution of others, other form of sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. Thanks again, Anastasia, for mentioning this. Next. You see those three elements, three constituent elements of the crime of trafficking, but actually it's very precise, but at times it could be very difficult for a judge to bring evidence and to prosecute a trafficker, and it could be easier to prosecute a trafficker just for rape, which is, of course, could be a war crime, could be a crime against humanity in certain conditions, but still we have here this precise definition. Next. You see the forms: forced labor, child recruitment, and child soldiers. Of course, child soldiers, you realize you have the prohibition of even having child soldiers in your own armed forces or in your own armed groups. And that's provided for not only by international humanitarian law, by additional protocols of 1977, but also by the convention again, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and especially optional protocol on children victims of armed conflicts. Forced sex, prostitution, surrogate motherhood. You know, it could happen that unfortunately you have women forced to bear children and then to sell those children. I don't have to tell you, it's really a very sad story. Then purchase and theft of children for adoption or abuse. And unfortunately, even in Switzerland, we had cases of children adopted from Sri Lanka. And years after, those children realized that they were sold by someone in Sri Lanka, not necessarily the mother, and bought by a Swiss family, and with not only a criminal action, but also a very difficult psychological position for the children. Some of those adopted children have been able to trace their mothers with, you could guess, also satisfaction, but also some great surprises. And okay, that's psychological. And child sexual abuse, mostly on the internet, but only internet. That's not only pictures, but also could live sessions of abuse, you know, and we don't have to give you the details if you want to. There is an Italian website which is documenting that kind of abuse online, pedopornography online. I can tell you it's unfortunately very, very frequent, and very frequent in Europe as well as in North America. Organ theft for transplantation, and organ theft could be also that you buy for a small sum an organ from a person in need, and this person in need will then have, of course, a diminution in his or her body, but also will possibly have a threat to his or her health for the life. Forced crime could be begging. We see that on our streets, even in Geneva. Theft, drug trafficking, but could be also terrorism. We've been seeing that, and even the Security Council did deal with this for ISIS in Iraq, and also for ISIS in the Sahel. Next. You see, smuggling of migrants, of course, is, of course, easier. Smuggling of migrants, the sovereignty of the state, the procurement, in order to obtain directly or indirectly or financial or other material benefit of the illegal entry into a state party of a person who is neither a national nor a permanent resident of that state. So, of course, then what I would like to draw your attention to is this. These crimes are closely linked to broader social, economic, and political issues that need to be addressed. Migration push and pull factors, global inequalities, unequal access to decent work opportunities, restrictive migration policies. So obviously, we could discuss that for hours. Next, please. Yep. Then what I would say, definitely human smuggling and human trafficking could be linked, and it could be, you know, a sliding door. Let's say one person who is one day a migrant asking to be smuggled becomes a victim of the same people and becomes a slave. And what I would like to stress, human trafficking is a form of contemporary slavery. There are more slaves today than ever in history, and that's mostly invisible, be it internationally or not, and everywhere. No country is immune. So I was mentioning the UK, but excuse me, my own country, Switzerland, also has, unfortunately, a number of slaves. It's difficult to say where and when, but it's a constant struggle of the police to try to actually identify, and that's one big problem, identification, and then of course to ask not only identification of victims, but of course identification of traffickers. And if there are networks that could take months, even years, to identify them and to get them before courts. Please. You see, Professor Tomoya Obokata, a Japanese, and a professor in the UK, and you see, he say, oh, why modern slavery persists? And he said the main factor contributing to the continuance of slavery in today's society is a lack of legislative framework to prohibit or prosecute these crimes. Yes and no, but at times, definitely, I would say more than a lack of legislative framework, that a lack of training of judges, attorneys, and even police officers. Excuse me, possibly Annie, you could tell us more about this. And factors, poverty as well as discrimination, women, children, indigenous groups and minorities. And then, as we shall see, we could all do something against this because we all are consumers and we all could possibly also influence businesses, private companies, but we could also ask, public authorities to check their supply chains, and public procurements could be one big tool to make pressure on people making profit from slave labor. Please, next. So you see vulnerability factors, and I told you poverty, social exclusion, discrimination, gender, but globalization, liberalization, freedom of movement, but limited, market economy focused on profit making. Yes, if profit making has no limits, then obviously the door is open for slave labor. Political factors, armed conflict, official corruption, poor government, weakened rule of law, but we could add, of course, two factors that would be COVID and climate change, because then people could be pushed not only to move, but also to push their own girls and boys to accept deceptive offers for jobs and then to become victims of human trafficking. Next. You see, there is a global initiative against transnational organized crime headquartered in Geneva, and you see, they have their this table of the impact of the pandemic in the fight against human trafficking, and among those, number 7, reduced enforcement, policing, investigation, justice system capacities. So we could also discuss that further. Yes, please, next. What can we do? Definitely, we use every opportunity to promote cooperation, build partnerships, create coalitions, share best practices. Yes, because indeed we have good practices, and we could learn from each other in using those best practices, educate and train, and indeed the main actors, first governments, the UN system, international organizations, regional organizations, NGOs, faith-based organizations, because quite often, for example, for the rehabilitation, be it child soldiers, be it women victims of sexual exploitation, women's congregations are quite active. Academia, some universities in the UK, but also elsewhere, have very interesting programs of research and teaching. Actors, when I say actors, for example, you had a very, let me say, moving film called Whistleblower. And the whistleblower was a story of an American police woman who was in a peacekeeping force of the UN in the Balkans, and who discovered that some of her colleagues were actually practicing human trafficking with women from Belarus and Russia, and exploiting them in Bosnia. And actually, she, of course, did denounce this, but she was kicked out of this UN peacekeeping force, and nothing happened to the people, members of this trafficking business. So I'm very sad about this, but still, as an actor, there was an actor playing this whistleblower, and I can tell you, it's a very powerful movie. Artists, of course, media, private business, because some private business did understand that, yes, they could gain from ethical auditing, from corporate social responsibility, and indeed, some did appoint officials for corporate social responsibility. Consumers, definitely, because as you know, you buy products with green labels, and at times it could be good to buy products with red labels, I may say slave-free services and objects. Local communities, yes, because quite often local communities are the first actor in preventing human trafficking or human smuggling. You know, I don't know, mothers in Senegal trying to convince other women and to tell them, please tell your sons that it's nonsense to try to risk their lives to migrate illegally to Europe, because it would be much better for you to try to start a small business here in Senegal and rather than to risk their lives there. But then that's why local persons, including victims as survivors, as actors of prevention, protection, rehabilitation. So you see, prevent, protect, rehabilitate, and prosecute perpetrators. But if you want to see the last webinar I organized with Fausto Pecar, Kevin Highland, and Anna Werner, was precisely on justice and human trafficking. It was on the 28th of June. And I can tell you, if you watch this, it's 1 hour and a half, you can see both the strength of legal instruments and the weakness of legal mechanisms, meaning by that the weakness of international courts and the weakness also of domestic courts to prosecute traffickers. Next. You see, obviously, we have to say that human rights could be useful instruments, definitely, and both as instruments and mechanisms. Labor law, including ILO, you know, ILO, and also bilateral treaties on migrant workers. You know, Julius, I don't have to tell you, but your country has a special ministry for Filipino workers abroad. And you also have you have bilateral treaties with some other countries to try to protect your migrant workers. But possibly you could tell us more about this if you are willing. No? Okay, later. Then refugee law, definitely. Protection of the child, that's certain. You have universal, I mentioned the Convention on the Rights of the Child. You have regional, also an African convention. You have domestic laws. You have local traditions, definitely. And IHL in armed conflicts, be it international or non-international armed conflicts. And again, Article 3 applicable to every armed conflict. International criminal law, yes, because definitely human trafficking could be a war crime or could be a crime against humanity if practiced as a policy and on a large scale. Protection of the global environment. Unfortunately, there is a clear link between, for example, slavery and the destruction of the environment, not only in Brazil, but also in other parts of the world. Then you could see that trade law, supply chains, and international, regional, and national security. As I mentioned to you, you have a few Security Council resolutions, and if you want to look at this, you could see the Security Council resolutions, especially in what I call the digital library. A digital library, that's a Word document with hyperlinks to UN and other documents available online. And then you see that among the human rights mechanisms, you have anti-trafficking special representatives, be it from the UN, especially reporting to the Human Rights Council, but also to the UN General Assembly, UNODC, as I mentioned, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. There is a very good special representative, Baliant Ritchie, a former prosecutor, and he is quite frequently participating in actually in conferences. He participated also in the 19th webinar on the 14th of June. But also you have national rapporteurs, like in the Netherlands. You have also special ambassadors, Sweden and the US, among others. So next. You see, sorry, I put that in French, but what can we do? Raise awareness, yes, collect best practices, create partnerships. But I must say, create partnerships is not only in action to protect, to prevent, protect, prosecute, but also to rehabilitate victims, reintegrate survivors, because it takes a lot of time to rehabilitate people who have been exploited, whose rights have been completely denied, and so on. Advocacy, and then I must say, not only the Catholic Church, the Church of England is quite active, other Christian churches, but also other spiritual leaders. There was an interreligious appeal on the 2nd of December 2014. You had definitely medias, as I mentioned a few before, educators, actors, artists, victims and survivors. Victims and survivors are quite important to take them on board for those efforts. And why so? Because of course they know from first hand what is at stake, and they know possibly better how to help victims and survivors. And address root causes: conflicts, crime, lack of development, education, lack of real jobs. I must say, if you are believers, pray for victims, helpers, and I must say for the conversion of traffickers and customers. Next. So that would be, you know, in 97, in 98, we had two, I would say, I would not say miracles, but nearly, two coalitions achieved a result that no one expected. In 97, that was the Coalition for the Total Abolition of Anti-Personnel Landmines, achieved the adoption of the Ottawa Convention. In 98, the Coalition for the International Criminal Court achieved the adoption of the Rome Statute. I believe that we could possibly consider a similar coalition to achieve the abolition of modern slavery, which is a crime against humanity and a war crime. But obviously for this we need governments, international organizations, private business, spiritual leaders, and including, I would say, opinion makers who could move governments to codification, and then, of course, to implementation. Please. Okay, and here I could give you all those additional resources. You see the webinar recordings. So they are actually available online and available online with subtitles in 7 different languages: English, French, German, Italian, Russian, Spanish, and simplified Chinese. Second, good practices, and that's a website also, Christus Liberat. Digital library, and look at this, I put that together with 2 assistants from Nice, Roman and Pepita, not the same Roman who is here, but Roman Diaz and Pepita Alemani. And free online courses on human trafficking in English and French, because indeed what I think could be useful is to make people more aware of what's going on now and what we could do together. So then I would like you to be able to ask questions. What, you have any questions? Yes, Juliette, please. Happy to see you asking a question.
Thank you, Professor, for your presentation. I hope my internet connection works better today.
Yes.
But you mentioned that one of the challenges to the prosecution of human trafficking and smuggling of migrants was not the lack of legislation, but rather the weakness of courts. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, thank you. That's a very good question. And you know, weakness of course, it doesn't mean that I'm critical of courts, but still, you know, if you have a simple murder, is easy to define, you know. Rape, a bit more difficult, but still now it's clearly identified as a war crime, you know. Then, as I mentioned to you, to have the elements of crime, of human trafficking, is more difficult. The act, the means, and the purpose. Wow, all those 3. And if one is missing, then you don't have the crime. Then, if you listen to Fausto Poccar, who is definitely an expert in international criminal law, he will tell you, oops, you know, after all, in 20 years of existence, the ICC did not prosecute anyone for human trafficking. And then even saying, you know, they were looking for big fishes, and actually the only people you could find as human traffickers were small fishes. So they were less interested. It was less spectacular, you know, and that's why they said no. And then another question could be, I don't know, I had the opportunity to organize with friends at the Order of Malta in Paris and in Rome. We organized a conference in Paris at the IFRI, Institut Français des Relations Internationales. We organized a conference on trafficking of Nigerian women from Nigeria to Europe. And we invited not only the ambassador of Nigeria in Paris, but also we invited magistrates and civil society from the Edo state. You know, that's in north of Nigeria. I don't have to tell you, Nigeria is a huge country. And then we invited them, and we invited also Nicolas Lecause. Nicolas Lecause keeps his name because that's an expert. He used to be chairing the Greta, L-E, un autre mot, C-O-Z. And actually, not only we had statements, but we had also informal meetings, because French officials and Nigerian officials, through diplomatic channels, through normal diplomatic channels, it would have been very, very difficult to get those people together. But in an informal setting, like in Paris, we could bring those people together. Same story, there's another informal setting, which is called the Santa Marta Group. And the Santa Marta Group it was founded by Pope Francis. And Pope Francis put together bishops, Catholic bishops, and police officers. And actually, the other day someone was saying that was Kevin Highland, who is a special advisor to the Santa Marta Group, after having being a member, he's still member of the Greta. And he said, but one day we were looking for a contact. That was again in Nigeria. And we could not get that through normal channels. So we asked nuns who were on the field, who were at the grassroots level, and we said, who can we contact there in order to get this information? And obviously, in one day, those nuns had the information, and the proceedings could move ahead. So to tell you, at times, we have to go beyond the formal to use the human factor, and actually possibly to be more courageous, because as you know, unfortunately, criminal networks are at times very powerful. They could be, they could have a good means to hire powerful lawyers and so on. So, and possibly at times they could have an influence on local governments. I don't have to. Okay, but that's all. Thank you, Juliette, for your question. And I see Annie. Annie, I'm very happy to see you. Please. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I was able to make it today because I've been out with the police this morning arresting a gang of human traffickers. So it's been a very interesting day for me already. It started very early. Anyway, my question is, we did some research last year across 6 different countries to find out how difficult it was for survivors of human trafficking to access justice, so to access legal representation. And one of the key findings that we came up with was there was just not enough lawyers in these countries trained to deal with human trafficking cases. And so I'd be very interested to understand from your perspective how we can advocate, if you like, for more specialist training in this area, and whether you know about any specific training courses across different markets that we could access.
Yes, thank you very much, Annie, for your question, because indeed I mentioned to you that I'm trying to organize online webinars and online trainings, but I think I don't have the ambition to train all stakeholders in the world, but still, I think we have there to take stock of a number of existing training programs. And as you know, training programs could be done and should be done, actually, if they are not happening now, at a domestic level, at a regional level, and definitely Greta, for example, is also providing a training. And at an international level, UNODC is also helping in that. ILO has also training programs. And as I told you, some universities, including university in the United Kingdom, what is a bit of a problem is that, of course, some courses are not open to everyone or are not free. And that's why I think we still have to do more on this, because the training could be taking place not only with police officers, not only with lawyers, not only with judges, but also could be happening with the immigration officers. You know, you should be able to identify a victim crossing a border, you know, a child with someone who is visibly not his or her parent or whatever. That could be good to stop this person, but also airline staff, you know, because airline staff on board, you could already identify a victim and ask by radio police to try to check, is this person really belonging to the family, or is this person a victim of trafficking? So that's why definitely also media could play a great role, as I said, because they could make the general public aware of the issue, and could possibly mobilize general public, could mobilize what I could call the public conscience against modern slavery. Because unfortunately, as I told you at the beginning, modern slavery is a negation of what made us very proud in 98, when we're saying, okay, look, we are celebrating of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In 99, look, we are celebrating the 1949 Geneva Conventions, and so on and so on. No time for celebration anymore, but now time for mobilization, and I think beginning with training and public information. But still, please, if you have any comment to add, I will be happy to hear it.
Thanks very much. The other area that needs a lot of training as well are health professionals, because in research, probably 9 out of 10 victims of modern slavery, human trafficking, have actually visited a health professional before they're actually found or rescued. So they're a good area for training as well.
I completely agree with you, because even as victims, you know, could need medical treatment, and then victim visit medical doctors, and if a medical doctor is properly trained, would immediately see that no, this person did not fall in the stairs, but this person was a victim of whatever. But I must say, then clearly you're right. Health professionals, also hotel professionals, because at times you can say, okay, what's happening in this place? Yes, that. So that's why it's a very wide. There is a very wide range of people who could be stakeholders and who could participate in that. I know, for example, that in France, you have the Commission Nationale Consultative des Droits de l'Homme, you know, a national consultative human rights commission, and there is a person, Geneviève Collat, who is member of this, and she is very active on behalf of victims of human trafficking. But she did press France, the French government, to adopt a national plan, and indeed a national plan should include training programs. And as I told you, unfortunately, training programs could be also addressing peacekeeping forces or military officers, because unfortunately military officers could be be more active in preventing or in stopping human trafficking. Any more question? Oh, Annie, thank you very much. You providing us, yes, access for justice for victims of human trafficking, Renate Europe. Okay, Renate is a network in Europe, and that's very useful that you're providing us with this link, because again, those networks are quite useful, and at times you say, okay, what can do those little groups of people do? But yes, but you know, working together is definitely adding force and adding strength, and also adding information, and some of those people could be quite knowledgeable, and at times they could give, for example, you know, you have the Good Shepherd Sisters. I do say Good Shepherd Sisters. That's very good. Thank you very much. Oh, you're doing a lot of good, I'm certain. But they have a foundation. And with this foundation, they established in Ituri, so in the République démocratique du Congo, they established a program to prevent and even to rescue kids from being victims of slave labor in mines. And that's very interesting. Actually, there is a very good movie about this. And with this movie, they show that, yes, you need to inform mothers and fathers, families at large, that it's not a good idea to send the little kids to the mines, because first they will miss the school, and second they will be threatened in their health, and they will not earn money you were expecting, and so on. So clearly, good practices need to be watched and imitated and supported.
Professor, we have one question,
yes?
Of Paola.
Oh, Paola, please. Yes.
Professor, thank you so much for this very, very interesting presentation. My questions are coming really from my ignorance on the subject. So
yeah.
Please consider that. I was wondering if you could go a little bit deeper with regards to the differences, interactions and overlappings between slavery and trafficking, because they are two different concepts at the same time. They are so interrelated that they are usually used together. So I was trying to go a little bit deeper to distinguish them. And the second question is regarding the relationship, if there is any, between human trafficking and torture. If it could be found that the pain is intentionally inflicted based upon discrimination, what could be found in some cases, and even the intentional infliction of pain could be found in some cases, and when there is consent of acquiescence of a public official, which also can be found in some cases. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Paula, for those quite interesting questions. Yes, you're right. Slavery and human trafficking are not exactly the same thing, that's true. Human trafficking, you have a clear definition, but unfortunately, this clear definition is limiting. And I would say slavery could be more useful, because slavery, that's clearly, you need simply exploitation. You need to convince judges that this person was reduced, was deprived of any rights, and had no freedom, had threats to her life, so clearly, at times I prefer using contemporary slavery than human trafficking, because human trafficking is again too limited and too difficult to prove. You know, evidence is difficult, and also evidence also difficult because at times victims are so traumatized that they are not able to convince judges of what they went through. You know, and then people say, no, but this person is telling us a lot of different things. We don't understand this person, what's happening here, and so on. And so clearly, it could be a great difficulty to go through those three elements, you know, the acts, the means, and the purpose. Then, second question, torture. Yes, quite often slavery or human trafficking involves torture. And torture could be, you know, to force the victim and to say, now I'm in charge, and now you're not anymore, and now beware, because if you try to escape, or if you don't abide by my orders, so you'll be suffering. But as you say, the definition you were giving is a definition in human rights, you know, a public official. But the definition in humanitarian law, you don't need to be a public official to fall within the definition of torture. So that's why I'm not so happy about the human rights definition of torture, because at times some people were saying, oh yes, that's only good for governments, but non-state actors could not be prosecuted because they are not acting on behalf of governments. No, okay, that's again, you know, the law against the law. Huh? But no, but definitely, what I would say is that's a good old Article 3, but also definitely also underogable human rights, because underogable human rights, yes, torture, but you not only have torture, you have also inhuman treatments, and that you don't need to be an actor of the government or pushed by the government to be condemned for this. So that's why I would say definitely we have to at times have a broader view of those, to see the spirit rather than the law, than the letter of the law, and to hopefully be able to prosecute those traffickers or those torturers in a more effective manner. Yeah. A very last question, or no? Okay, because we are right on time. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your questions, and definitely you can access all those documents I gave you the links to, and if you want to ask me questions, you know my email address, so we can still discuss that online if you so wish. So have a good afternoon and see you tomorrow morning.
Great. Thank you, Professor. See you tomorrow. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
See you.
Juliette.
Thank you.
Ouais. Alors, Roman, tout va bien?